Well, hello everyone, and today we've got something very special, which is I get a chance to watch or to talk to somebody that I've been watching for a little while here on BookTube, and that is T from An Erudite Adventure. So T, for people who might not watch your channel, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you cover on your channel, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So I'm T, as already mentioned, from An Erudite Adventure is the channel, and mostly I'm a booktuber that I read mostly fantasy. I think you could probably say if you calculated everything up, it's probably mostly fantasy. But I do a lot of historical fiction. I do a lot of science fiction, and a lot of Arthurian literature, which is also fantasy and historical fiction. And anyways. So I do a lot of those things, and mostly the goal of my channel is to learn, to grow, to become a better reader, to understand more, to understand storytelling. And so that's kind of the goal of my channel. That's kind of what I talk about when I talk about books, whatever it is that I'm reading. So I guess, I don't know, does that more or less introduce me?
Yeah, no, I think so. Yeah, one question that I was thinking about as I was prepping some questions here is if you were to take not like these are my three favorite like series or books, but if
Mhm.
you were to pick three books or series that are like I want to show somebody what like this is the best encapsulation of what my reading taste is, like what would those three be?
Mhm. Ooh. Well, Lord of the Rings would have to be one.
Take a shot,
Um,
everyone. He said it.
um, yeah, no, Lord of the Rings would have to be one. I want to say Redwall by Brian Jakes. I feel like is another one that tells a lot about me as a reader. It is one of my favorite series as well, but it more than that. It tells a lot about what I enjoy as a reader. I'm trying to think because the other one that comes to mind, I'd love to say something Arthuriana, but I have not found something Arthuriana that is just like this is what I read for. I guess you could say Pendragon Cycle with the first two books, Taliesin and Merlin, because those two are incredible. But I think more than that, I'm going to say Glacian Saga by Andrew D. Meredith. Um, I think that focuses a little bit more on the style of books that I read, the way that I view storytelling. I've talked to Andrew quite a bit, and we align our mindset towards storytelling aligns a lot. And so I think with those three series, they're all epic fantasy, but they also tell a lot about me as a reader. I feel the fact that being some of my favorite series of all time, all three of them, but also they just encapsulate me as a reader, I guess, is how you put it. So I guess those are the three that I'd say.
Sure. You mentioned it a second ago, so I want to chase this rabbit here. What because you said like your channel covers a lot about Arthurian literature. What first got you into that? And what is it about like the Arthurian myth that keeps you looking for like different remixes or versions or different retellings of it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's one of those myths that has been my favorite since I was a kid. As long as I can remember, I've loved the Arthurian myth. Same with Robin Hood. I love Robin Hood. I haven't done nearly as much Robin Hood reading as I have King Arthur, but I remember reading King Arthur books. I think probably the Howard Pyle King Arthur as a kid, and several other things. I remember watching. I don't remember what all I've watched as a kid, but there was things that influenced me in that way. As I got older, Merlin, the BBC TV series Merlin, became one of my favorite series, and that's King Arthur. It's just been a lot of things, but then it really kind of came into focus. My last year of college, I took a medieval literature class that was focused on Arthurian literature, and so that I kind of dove headfirst into it that way, and just had a blast in that class. One of my favorite classes that I took, and we read Lamort Arthur. We read um, Tristan. Read Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, which is another one of my favorite stories. We read, what else was it that we read? Colwick and Olwen is an old Welsh tale, King Arthur Welsh tale. I feel like there was one other thing that I can't remember that we read as well. And so we read a fair amount, and then we had discussions about it, the symbology of what different things meant, how the different stories affected us, what, just this general things that you have in classes. But that really resonated with me in a lot of ways. The teacher was excellent, for one. The class was super fun. It was something I was interested in. And right before that class started, I had started reading, and I was 4 chapters into Once and Future King by T.H. White, and I was loving it. And then I got into that class, and I was like, I can't do Once and Future King at the same time as I'm doing Lamort. So I put Once and Future King down because I had to. I couldn't put down Lamort. And I came back to it after the class was over, and I did not enjoy it. The experience of it is so weird because it's basically 4 different books.
Yeah.
And I don't mind that. I don't mind having these kind of pictures, different images that we're seeing that are telling the story. I don't mind that at all. What I had a problem with was that White was trying to tell, it felt to me like White was trying to tell 3 different stories, and none of them made sense with each other. He was trying to do a retelling of Lamort for a modern audience. He was trying to tell his own version of the King Arthur tale, and he was trying to have this deep philosophical discussion, and none of the 3 worked individually and definitely not together. And so for me, that's why T.H. White didn't work. But I also probably should reread it because everybody else loves it. But anyway, so those things kind of jump-started my interest in Arthurian literature, and with my history and my childhood of loving the myth, I just wanted to continue that. And so that really pushed me into studying it more and actually making it a point to consistently read more and more Arthurian literature and make that a focus of the channel. Yeah, I think that's kind of most of how that began.
So you talked about like studying these different parts of the Arthur myth in college, but it seems like more than just like an academic study. It seems like this is something that's become like a passion for you. You've read a bunch of different versions. Is there something about it? Is it just that it is like a grand like Western myth? Is it the different like motifs that are in it? What about it has like gripped you ever since college that it's carried into adult life since then?
I think the motifs is a good aspect of it. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I love fantasy, and it is so heavily inspirational and tied to the fantasy genre. I think that's probably part of it. I think the mythology aspect is part of it. The themes that are explored through Arthurian literature and can be explored through Arthurian literature, definitely a part of it. There's a whole lot to it, for sure, and it's not really any one thing that I can point to, but it's one of those myths that has inspired me, and maybe it's because I'm an American, European heritage, and just it's part of my DNA, if you want to say it that way. It's my history in a way that draws me to that. Which is, I don't entirely understand what I mean by that even, because I'm American as it gets, and the tales of America are not Arthurian tales, but I think there's so much about it that has been influential to storytelling and I think probably that has a lot to do with it. I think it has to do with the way that it has influenced storytelling as a whole, that draws me back to it time and time again. Of course, I love knights. That's so much fun. So there's that too. Just the aesthetics of it is fun. but there's definitely, probably as a kid, the aesthetics of it more than anything else was what drew me to it. But then as I've gotten older, learning more about storytelling, learning more about influences, learning more about theme, um, or character types and story types and everything, I think that has been a huge part of what makes the Arthurian myth so impactful to me, maybe.
If you had somebody who was coming up to you, maybe they're brand new to your channel, they haven't seen, all the different videos that you've done on Arthuriana, and they were like, I want, like, what is a great, like, version of the Arthur myth? And maybe they're not ready for Thomas Mallory, or
Right.
was it Geoffrey of Monmouth that has
Mm.
an Arthur version? If
Yeah.
they're wanting something that's
Just
like a
finished that one.
modern. Oh, okay, yeah. So if they're wanting something that's more of like a modern version of it, like, where are you pointing them? What are a couple of different options that you think are good representations, since T.H. White is in the doghouse?
I I actually would point to T.H. White for a lot of people.
Okay.
Even with my not appreciating it as much as probably I should.
Hmm.
And the reason why is because he does modernize those stories. He does modernize Lemort. I think, I mean, Pendragon Cycle is a good one in some ways.
Mhm.
It's very accessible to modern readers, but at the same time, it doesn't really focus on the Arthur myth in the same
No,
way. And so, as good
it's much
as
more big picture in a lot
yeah,
of ways than.
um, I need to go back and reread them, but there's some great illustrated classics that are telling the stories, and I remember reading those as a kid and loving those. And I think I don't know if they were all by Howard Pyle or if only one of them was by Howard Pyle, but I do like Howard Pyle and his compilations of the myths, because he did Robin Hood as well. Um, so I might point towards that. Honestly, I'd probably point towards BBC Merlin
Hmm.
because that introduces you to the characters more than anything else and gets you invested through good storytelling, because the CGI is not that great in that show, but the storytelling is excellent.
Now, is that the, like, the old one with Sam Neill, or is that the more
No,
more
that's the
modern one?
2010s one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
Colin Morgan plays Merlin. I can't remember who the rest of the cast is, but
Okay.
it's a again, it's not faithful adaptation,
Sure.
but what is faithful when you're talking about King Arthur?
Right. Right.
So uh, I would probably point to that. I would also probably point to Sir Gawain and the Green Knight,
Hmm.
even though that is poetry. I
Hmm.
would still probably say read that one, because it's such a great exploration of what the Arthurian myth was created to do. Um, so I'd probably point there, and it's easy and it's short. So
Sure.
I would still point to those ones. Um, the other one that I've read recently, that fairly recently, it's been a couple years. It's a retelling of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, but that is Gawain by J.P. Harker, and that's it's not self-published by it, but it's by a small press, and it's a YA, kind of like YA straddling the adult line type thing, and that does an interesting retelling of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, setting it up for a epic fantasy kind of crossover event style series. It's the only book he's published so far in that series, but that's one that I liked quite a bit. There's more. There's a lot of modern King Arthur stories that I have not read,
Hmm.
and so I need to continue working through that and seeing. I would have to go back and read all of the, or look at all the books that I have read to give a better answer, because those are the ones that
Sure.
are coming to mind as something a little bit more accessible. I love Colwick and Olwen, but that's not accessible. That
Hmm.
it is in the sense that it's public domain, but it's not accessible in terms of understanding what it's doing. That one,
Sure.
you have to understand Welsh storytelling, or you have to have somebody who can explain it to you as you go through it. But it's fun. It's very fun. I don't know. I don't I guess I don't have a great answer for you with that one.
Sure. No, that makes sense. Now I just to keep with Arthuriana for a second here. My recollection is you have read some of Mary Stewart's books,
Oh,
right?
that's a perfect example.
Okay.
That's an excellent starting point for modern readers.
Okay.
I've read the first two in that series. I need to get to the third one this quarter, but I've read the first two, and I was going through Geoffrey of Monmouth, Histories of the Kings of Britain as well, and she basically takes that and tells it in novel form, and it's excellent.
Okay.
I think it's excellent. A lot of other readers, modern readers, will probably feel like it's dated to some degree, but I don't agree. I have different opinions from a lot of booktubers even
Sure.
on what makes good storytelling. So definitely, but no, that's an excellent example, an excellent starting point for modern readers, I would say.
Okay. Yeah, because I have not read them yet, but they are on my radar. I think I have the first four or something like that. So that and Marion Zimmer Bradley with The Mists of Avalon are
I
like
haven't
sort of
read that one
famous
yet.
modern
Yeah.
versions of it.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of things about Mist of Avalon, and I am not sure if I want to read that one.
Sure.
I've at times I'm like, well, maybe, but then I'm not sure. I haven't decided yet. It's one that I know I need to read. Same with Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, which is Mark Twain. I need to read both of those. I do want to read the Twain. I don't know that I want to read the Bradley.
Sure.
I haven't decided yet.
Sure. That that's right. I forgot that about that one from Mark Twain, but I did read that. If you are going to read it, my recommendation, since you do audiobooks, is to listen to Nick Offerman read it.
I can hear it.
Right, like it is
the
pitch perfect, like even better than Andy Serkis reading Lord of the Rings, as in terms of like perfect marriage of an audiobook narrator to the source material, is like Nick Offerman like sassing all of these, British people as this Yankee character.
Yeah.
It's quite a hoot.
I will be on the lookout for that then, for sure, because that sounds great.
Well, before we leave Arthur, I've got to ask, like, do you have any favorite Arthur adaptations? I think I've heard you mention the old Clive Owen movie, which like myself and like four other people like, but
which one's that? I'm not.
That's the one with Keira Knightley. That's
Okay.
like the very Roman one.
That one's fine. There's like it's good. It's a good film. I'm not the biggest fan of Keira Knightley, to be honest, and that brings it down a little bit. I do like, as I already mentioned, the BBC Merlin. That's also not very faithful, not very realistic adaptation, but I enjoy that one a lot. I also, another one that's not faithful or accurate or anything is the King Arthur Legend of the Sword. I just have a ton of fun with that film. It's not that fantastic, but it's super fun.
Yeah.
And then what's the other one that I'm thinking of? I don't know if I can remember it. There's another adaptation that I have watched, and I can't remember what it is. I know I've watched the adaptation of Connecticut Yankee. I can't remember. That's not one. MacGyver has a couple episodes. The original MacGyver has a couple episodes where he gets maybe time traveled back into King Arthur period. It's weird. The frame narrative is weird, but while it's there, that's kind of fun. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's kind of fun. But I don't know. I don't have a great answer for you on adaptations.
Okay.
I mean, I have the two that I really have a lot of fun watching, which is Merlin and King Arthur Legend of the Sword, but they're not fantastic for understanding the myth very well.
Well, I gotta tell you, the Legend of the Sword one is funny because I went through this stage where I had an unhealthy like relationship with movies, like avoided my responsibilities as a teenager, didn't get schoolwork done because I was like in my laptop. And there was a period of time where that Charlie Hunnam movie, I like watched it every day for like 3 weeks straight. So I've watched it probably a little too much, but I agree with you. It's like a very dumb movie. It's very
It's
dumb, but
yeah.
it's a lot of fun.
I would love a sequel.
Yeah, that's right. It's like there's plenty to work with there.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well,
It's just the fun. I think that's what makes me enjoy it so much is how fun it is while not being comedy. I'm not
yeah.
the biggest fan of comedy as a genre, as like the main genre, but it can be used well. And I
So
feel like
Monty
that
Python is a no-go then.
I haven't watched it,
Oh,
but I
okay.
also have no desire to. So
Well, there you go. So this will be the ranking. We'll bring T back on in like a year. Which is worse, T.H. White or Monty Python's, King Arthur?
that means I have to watch and reread.
No, I just we won't make you do that.
I
But
probably should anyways.
hey, there you go. I will say I know that you've read well, I'll segue into this. You've read I think On Stranger Tides by Tim Powers. I
Yep.
would be very interested to hear what you think of Drawing in the Dark by Powers.
I would like to read more Powers. That's there's two authors that I probably more than anybody else need to read more of, and that's Powers and Jane Wolfe. And I know they both have Arthurian stuff, so
Yeah.
I need to dig into both of those for sure.
Yeah, because like Drawing in the Dark is not is for a weird like personal reason and it will change if I reread it, but I just read it at a weird time last year. It was not the book that clicked with me the most, but it has some of his most interesting stuff where he's playing with, he does like these secret history novels where he adds the supernatural to history. And Drawing in the Dark, like it will say on the back of the book, this is an Arthurian book, but like you kind of don't know that, and the character certainly doesn't know that for like most of the book, and so it's kind of fun, like interesting. He meets an old like man with a gray beard in chapter 1. Who could that be? And as the pieces come together in that one especially, like I said, it's not the book that I would normally recommend people start Powers with, but you've already read some of his, and because of your love for Arthurian stuff and different ways that people can play with the myth, I don't know, I would really like to hear your thoughts on that one specifically. So.
I will. Is that the first book in a series by any chance?
No, it's
wonderful.
Just a standalone.
I can actually plan on reading it then. I'm trying really hard not to start any series, and I've got so many that I want to. I need to start Meredith's Needland Leaf. I need to start Sun Eater. Those are probably my two biggest ones that I need to try and start this year. And I can't. I need to finish up some other series. I had 56 ongoing series the other day that I had read at least the first book in, and I was like, that's unacceptable. I've closed out 2 of them, I think.
Sure.
I might have closed out 2 of them already, which helps a lot.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more that I need to get through. So I'm trying to stay away from starting new series. But if that one is a standalone, then I can actually plan on reading it. And I think Wolf has a standalone Arthurian as well.
Yeah, so, his book Castle View.
Yeah. So I definitely plan on trying to get to both of those this year if I can.
Well, that's one of the things that drew me to both Wolfe and Powers, not just because I think they're both authors that are like really creative and do something a little bit different in each book, which I like. Not just because they're a little bit off the beaten path, but also is like they pack a lot into a short page count. And so you will get a full like 800 pages book worth of material in like 300 pages, which I love. And both of them write a lot of like standalone novels, which, I appreciate. Right. Well, and I'm actually, so I'm working through a few different Tim Powers books at the beginning part of this year, and I'm reading his first novel right now, which is called Forsake the Sky. It was published under a couple of different titles, but the version I have is called that. And there's a character whose last name is Orcrist.
Interesting.
Like the sword from, was it from The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings both? Yeah.
Mostly just The Hobbit. It's mentioned in Lord of the Rings, but it's only appears in The Hobbit.
Okay, there you go.
I can go into that history if you'd like.
Well, actually, it's a perfect transition. Do you remember your first time reading Lord of the Rings?
Yeah. Yes, I do. So I think it was 2012. It was either 2012 or 2013. Um, and therefore I was either 12 or 13. And I read The Hobbit. And then December came around. I read it in like November. I read The Hobbit in like November. And then December came along and I read all three Lord of the Rings books. And then my sister got me an illustrated edition of or I guess it was a special edition of The Hobbit for Christmas. And so I reread that before the new year. And so I read The Hobbit, The Lord of the Rings, and then The Hobbit again, all within like November, December of that year. And then the next year I spent reading Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, Children of Hurin.
Hmm.
And so kind of dove right into that world as well and had a blast doing that. Very read that at the perfect time in my life for it to become my personality. And I've tried not to allow that to show in my everyday life because people don't appreciate that very much.
That's valid. What was it about like Lord of the Rings that has made this so, as you said, like so much a part of your personality?
I think in a lot of ways it was kind of the first real series that I'd read. The first real fantasy that I read. And that's not entirely true because I'd read other things. I've been a reader all my life. I read a lot of Magic Treehouse. I read a lot of Redwall as a kid, but this was kind of like my transition series. And part of it was I was reading it so that I could watch the movies, but then you watch the movies and they don't compare to the books.
Right.
So I kind of ruined the movies for myself. As fantastic as they are, and as much as I love them, they're not the books. And I go back to the books far more than I go back to the movies. So that's part of it. It also opened up my understanding of storytelling and my desire for storytelling and my desire for desire and what's the word I'm looking for? I guess we'll just do the simple word, love for languages. And what Tolkien did with languages there in that series and world building and cultures and just understanding people kind of helped me to understand the world in probably better than anything else that I'd ever done up to that point, and even up to this point, because that was kind of the catalyst for everything that I have done since, in a way. Not it's kind of weird to say that, and it's kind of as a Christian it kind of feels blasphemous to say that, or say it that way at least, but that's not the intention behind it. The intention is more of at least the way that I view it, if we want to get kind of a little bit religious for a second, it would be kind of that God put those books in my life in order to help me to understand some things at just that time that he did. And he has used that then to bring me to where I am today. That's kind of, if I were to put it in more religious terms, how I would phrase it.
Sure.
But it is very, very much a influential, opened my mind to stories and to what can be done with storytelling in a different way, and made me interested in languages in a way that I had never been before. So I guess that's kind of the foundation of it all in a way.
How many times do you think you've read them since then?
I have tried to count and I am not positive. It's around 6 at least. I know I listened to, and the weird thing is that I'm not entirely sure what I can count as, which times I can count as reading them, because there's a fantastic BBC audio drama adaptation of the trilogy of Lord of the Rings. Just utterly brilliant. If a more faithful to my imagination of the series than the movies are. And it's super well done, but it cuts a lot out. It's an abridged audio drama. It's not telling, I mean, you cut out Tom Bombadil, there's major sections that get removed. And so I'm not sure if I can count that one as having read it, except
Sure.
that I also, that's how I read it last year. I do an annual reread each year of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. And for 2025, I went back and found that audio drama and listened to them again.
Hmm.
Um, and so I feel like I can count it, but I'm not sure.
Sure.
Either way, I know the story very well, and so it doesn't bother me that things are being abridged. It's the same reason why I'm not bothered when they remove Tom Bombadil from the movies, because it makes sense when you are adapting the story, which is a very different story. The story of the Lord of the Rings is it's basically a memoir of four hobbits during the events of the War of the Ring,
Hmm.
whereas the movies are the quest to destroy the One Ring.
Hmm.
And so they're two very different stories that are being told,
Yeah.
and that has to be done. You have to make those adaptations. And so I don't fault the movie for doing that. I don't fault the audio dramas for making the changes that they needed to in order to make each book a 4 hour audio drama. But it does change things a lot, and you have to understand that. And I don't know. I mean, I don't count watching movies as reading the books, but I do kind of count listening to the audio drama as reading
Sure.
the book in a weird way. So I'm not sure,
Sure.
but I do think I've read it at least 6 times, even without that. So
Well, you're talking about everybody cutting out Tom Bombadil, and at least we can all be thankful that Amazon brought him back.
okay, this might be a hot take. I don't hate the way they did it.
Interesting. I've not watched season 2, so
So I, I would have preferred that they didn't. But with what they did, with the exception of where they reused lines inappropriately, they took when he talks to Old Man Willow, they basically took that and applied it to a different tree, and that bothered me because it doesn't work. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And so that one I did not like. But the way that they adapted him, it's a very different Tom Bombadil than we see in the Lord of the Rings. But for what the show is doing, it was one of the least offensive things that they have done.
sure.
And he's not as energetic. He's not as bubbly as he is in the book, but he fits the tone of the show, and he adapts well for what they're doing with the show. And because of that, I actually didn't mind him very much, which is
Hmm.
interesting. And I think, well, I expected to dislike him, and I was pleasantly surprised by that. But I think I may be one of the only people, at least that I've heard talk about it, who didn't mind that the way that they did it.
Hmm.
If they have to do it, the way that they did it was a decent way to do it, in my opinion. But I don't
Why
know.
do you think so many people bounce off of those parts of the book? Is it just because it's an internet meme that goes around? Is it because the movies don't have them? Because really, he's only in 2 chapters. This is
Yeah.
not get through the slog and Wheel of Time. This is
And they're
not
short
get through
chapters
the
too.
400 like middle pages of Way of Kings that are a bit slower. This is 2 short chapters. And
Yeah.
I cannot tell you the number of people that I've heard who have said, I tried reading Fellowship, got to Tom Bombadil, and just noped out. So why do you think that is?
It's it's really hard to. I think more than because it's not in movies, because it's an internet. I think more than that, it's because it's unexpected.
Hmm.
They and they're approaching the story for something that it isn't. They're approaching the
Mm,
story for the quest to destroy the One Ring. And when you look at it, when you take the story for what it is, when you take it for that memoir of four hobbits, um, and you go into that story, he becomes necessary to the story.
mhm.
He becomes something that makes sense. He's a piece of the world. I mean, like, how many times while you're traveling or something, you come across something, a restaurant or something that you see the one time, but then you move on and you never think about again. But at that time, it was helpful. It was important. It was influential to you. Um, that's kind of, and Bombadil is far more influential than just that, but it's that same sort of thing where he's just a piece of the world that you come across on this
Mhm.
journey. They wrote it down because it's part of the story that they were writing down, and then they moved on. Um, so there's that it doesn't fit their picture of what Lord of the Rings is supposed to be. But then it's also the musicality, the way he speaks, the way he feels out of place, the fact that he doesn't feel like he's necessary to the story. He's more necessary than people think, but he feels weird. It feels like a strange break in the action. It feels like a strange break in the tension. And I think you have to understand Tolkien a little bit better than that to just accept and be like, no, he's not necessary, because he's very strategically placed in the book, in the story, as a way to does lots of things. He does a whole lot of things, but one of the things that he does is he helps the hobbits complete a quest, if you want to say it that way, complete this first step on their journey, and be able to move on from there, to move forward from that point. They've overcome an obstacle, and now they're able to move forward stronger. And that was through his help, through him coming into the story. It's the first time that you see Frodo being truly brave. He fights the influence of the ring, for especially when the Black Riders are near. He fights that for a little bit, but then it's not until you actually see it at the beginning when Merry and Pippin are being eaten by Old Man Willow. Frodo wakes up and goes running up and down the bank yelling, "Help, somebody help." And he's the one who actually finds Tom Bombadil coming back, providentially, just happens to be coming back at the right time in order to save them, in order to do that. And so there's that. He doesn't just give up. He goes and seeks help. So that's one. But then more profoundly is when they're in the barrow, and he's the one who wakes up. He sees the hand creeping towards the three hobbits. He takes the sword and fights. That's his first time he could just freak out and not know what to do and give up, but he chooses to fight. And so there's that absolutely ties into the character of Frodo, into the journey of Frodo as a character, that builds and helps Frodo get to the point where he does at the end of Lord of the Rings, because without that first trial, he wouldn't have been able to get there. That he would have fallen short long before that point. But also, it acts as a rest for the hobbits, which is necessary. They need the break, but also we as the readers need the break more than we realize. Because you have those few chapters leading up to it with the Old Forest and the chapter. You know what? I have the chapters right here. I'm currently rereading it. The chapters that lead up to that are Three is Company, which even starting before that, The Shadow of the Past, where Gandalf is telling the history to Frodo, and you start learning about what the ring is, and that starts laying heavy on you as you're reading. And then you get into Three is Company, and it's a walk. You're first encountering the Black Riders, shortcut to Mushroom, where the hobbits feel like they're coming face to face with the Black Riders and are terrified. Conspiracy Unmasked is a nice kind of reprieve, but then immediately you go into the Old Forest, and it's this oppressive atmosphere just weighing down on these, with the fear of the Black Riders behind them. And so it's just darkness after darkness after darkness after darkness after darkness. And if you didn't have that that brief rest in the House of Tom Bombadil, it would change the whole flavor of the rest of the series. It would become a grimdark story. You need those brief moments of reprieve that allow you to then say, okay, let's continue on. And so narratively, it functions far more impactfully than people realize. And I guess going back to the thing with people bouncing off it, if you do bounce off it, skip the chapters. Just go right to At the Sign of the Prancing Pony and move on.
You heard it. You have T's permission. Skip over it.
I also say the same thing about skipping the songs. I love them, and they're fantastic additions to the lore. They build out the world so much. Tolkien did more in 900 pages. If you can say 1200 if you count The Hobbit, than Sanderson did. Than really any other author. He built this entire world, and part of that's because he had been world building his entire life up to that point. But he did more in those 1200 pages than any other author has ever done, at least that I have read so far. Maybe there's somebody else who has done that much, but I have not found it. And that's impressive in and of itself. But a lot of that comes from the songs and from the poetry. But if that is hindering you and being able to read and understand and enjoy the story, skip it. I as much as I love it, skip it. It's not necessary. If it's hindering your ability to continue through the story, just move on. And you'll miss some lore, you'll miss some character moments, but it really, those aren't the things more. There's a whole lot about the inclusion of those moments that doesn't make sense to our modern audience. I've heard people talk about this all the time, or not all the time, but several times I've heard people do videos on this and stuff, where in the past, and before phones, before radio, before television, people went over to each other's houses and they stood around a piano and sang. Like, that's what people did. That was how people spent time with each other. And Tolkien came from that sort of a time, more than our modern. I mean, everybody now has cell phones that they're looking at all the time. We don't understand that. We're not connected to that world. And Tolkien, with his constantly looking to the past for the beauty that it was, and acknowledging that and saying, I wish we had some of this still today, he brings that into his story. And it doesn't make sense to our modern readers, to our modern minds. And so, again, if you need to skip it to get to the story, go ahead. I do encourage people to read it if they can, if they want to try. Tolkien is a fantastic poet. There's some brilliant pieces of poetry. The Adventures of Tom Bombadil is a collection of poems that he's done, and they're fantastic. They're very different from each other, but there's some beautiful pieces of poetry in there. Same with scattered throughout all of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. There's a lot of very similar things, but the
Song of Beren and Luthien, I think, is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever read.
It is. And the other thing that I've noticed, the more I read him, each of his characters has their own voice, even in their poetry that they compose, which they're all composed by him, but he is able to have those, and you notice it most prominently in the Lament to Gandalf. When the elves are singing, Frodo is translating that, and then Sam creates his own verse to it, and that Sam's verse is drastically different, but it's so quintessentially Sam, but it's also still a good piece of poetry. And it's really interesting when you can dig into it like that. The other one that I really, really love is the Aragorn's poem, the All That Is Gold Does Not Glitter. That's a very beautiful poem as well. So there's absolutely some gorgeous poetry in there, and he's a very good poet. I'm not going to say that he's the best poet ever, because I haven't read every poet, and so I don't know, but he's very talented. He's much more skilled than a lot of people think, and I think probably that's part of it as well, is a lot of modern readers don't read poetry. They don't understand poetry. And that's also a turnoff. I mean, if I'm trying to read something that I just don't understand, I'm not going to enjoy it nearly as much as something that I have studied or at least enjoy to some degree. And as a kid, we did poetry and as part of our schooling. And so we would memorize poems, and they were funny, not very interesting or deep poems, but it still instilled in me that love and that desire and understanding of poetry, and I need to do a whole lot more. I don't understand poetry, but I would like to spend some time studying it and understanding it, and just understanding how it works and why people create it, and how, I mean, I understand why people create it, but I want to understand much like with my study in trying to understand how storytelling works and how to build a story. I want to understand how poetry works and how to build a piece of poetry, because it's never been something that I've been skilled at. Even when I have moments of the ability to rhyme, it's still not poetry in my mind. And so, anyways, I'll move on past that. I think
Yeah.
I kind of talked about it all now.
Yeah, no, but what you're saying makes sense. Well, just on the whole like Tom Bombadil of it all, I think, well, there's a couple of thoughts that come to mind. The first is I think that you hear a lot of people who just like at a basic level do not understand Frodo. Like
Mhm.
how many times do you hear people say like, "Oh, I like Bilbo more than Frodo," and I'm like, "Fine, you can prefer that.
Right,
That's fine."
absolutely.
But like people don't understand like in the opening chapters to Lord of the Rings, like Frodo tries to throw the ring into his little hearth fire and he can't do it, you
I
know?
know.
And it's like, you think he's going to be able to do this when he's in the heart of Mordor, like at Mount Doom? Like, Tolkien told
Yeah.
you what is going to happen at the end of the story
Mhm.
right there at the beginning. And so there's this, and once again, as modern readers, it takes a bit of an adjustment because it's not what we're used to. But I see in Lord of the Rings a lot of, I don't think it's just me reading it into there. I think there's a lot against self-centeredness and individualism
Mhm.
of being able to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, and you can do it if you just like buckle down and try harder. And one of the elements that you see in Lord of the Rings is a lot of I don't know how you describe it other than like crying out for aid from
Yeah.
something that's above you, something that's
Yep.
greater than you. And
Yeah.
so you get that with like, is it Frodo that calls on Elbereth when fighting
Yeah.
Shewop? And then you've got um
He does it with the Black Riders on Weathertop, and then Sam does it. Well, they both do it actually, but Sam does it more in Mordor on the Morgul Pass.
that's okay, yeah.
He does it with when he's trying to enter Cirith Ungol as well. So, but
Okay.
yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
and like what you see in the section with Tom Bombadil is the first presentation of that clearly, both with Old Man Willow and then again where Tom is like, "Hey, here's the instructions, guys.
Mhm.
When you are at your bottom, when you don't know what to do, like essentially like look up and cry for help,
Yeah,
and help will come." And you get that with the Barrow-wight scene, and
mhm.
like in that sense, like yeah, Tom Bombadil on a theme level is absolutely necessary to understanding that as part of
It's
the series. And
yeah,
as somebody who falls down and like trips up and fails a lot in my own life, like I don't know, that is a very hope filling theme as part of the
yeah,
story that I love.
yes. That and the fact that with uh, with with Elbereth, but also with Tom Bombadil, that's part of a poem. He Tom teaches them a poem, a little rhyme
Mm,
to sing in order to call out, and tying back into music and the importance of music in Lord of the Rings and the prominence of it. You go and read the Silmarillion, and the entire world was created through song, through music, and so it's Tolkien doing this world building as well at the same time that you see the hints of in Lord of the Rings, but it also is absolutely Tolkien's Catholicism coming through, his Christianity, his understanding of a need to call upon a higher power, a need to pray, essentially. And there's so many times. One of the times that I read through it, I was making note of all the times where there's either basically a prayer, a calling out to somebody for help or for aid, or a prophetic dream of some sort.
mm,
And there's so many of them throughout the
interesting.
whole series, and it's fascinating to look at what it is that's being seen, what the visions are that the characters are receiving, or yeah, it's just super interesting, and it all ties back into that same theme. So
What as a Tolkien fan and as somebody who's obviously read the books, is very familiar with it and is familiar with how Tolkien like thinks about a lot of things, what is the most like frustrating thing that you hear people misunderstanding, whether as a criticism or you hear people like praise something about the books and you're like, actually that's not right?
um probably Aragorn,
Hmm.
and that's mostly due to how he's portrayed in the movies, and people think, oh, but this is not how he's done in the movies, so I don't like it. Well, the movies came after the book. The movies are an adaptation, and so that one just on like a petty level gets me. There's some other things that are a bit bigger. People talk about, and people talk about both sides of it. How Tolkien was against allegory. He didn't like this, that, and the other. He wasn't trying to say anything with his books, and so they'll get on that, but then they'll also be fighting and talking about how he was so against industrialization and modernization and all these things, and they're doing the same thing, standing on this box, just yelling out of both sides of their mouth type thing, and neither of those is completely accurate. Tolkien was against allegory, and he talks about that. I forget where it is that he talks about that. It might be in On Fairy Stories, or it might be in the prologue. I'm not sure, but he talks about it at some point where his opinion is less of that he dislikes allegory for the sake of it being allegory, and more because it kind of simplifies things too much almost, and makes them
What makes it not about the story?
Right.
It's like, no, the story is just purely a mechanism to preach or to indoctrinate or to propagandize or whatever word you want to use.
And so that's more of what he's against than just the strict concept that you could be using something as a reference to something else.
Right. I mean, we just said like Elbereth, like what is that? Right. You know, it's like he's a Catholic guy. So who do you think that's supposed to be?
Yeah. So there's absolutely that aspect of it that probably is most frustrating to me, because they act like they understand Tolkien, and some of them do. So absolutely, there's people who understand Tolkien way better than I do, and I freely admit that. I know that I'm not the most well-read or well knowing or anything Tolkien scholar, and in fact I wouldn't even consider myself a Tolkien scholar, because I don't have the experience or the depth of understanding and knowledge that these people have. But that does frustrate me when people talk about that, but at the same time they're saying, oh, but he's so against industrialization, and he's not. He just also wants us to respect the beauty of the past and the magic of nature and all that kind of stuff. And that's more of what, again, there's nuance to it that people refuse to acknowledge. So
that's
interesting. I don't know. And people might disagree with me. If feel free to disagree with me. I'm not offended or opposed to that at all. In fact, I would love to learn and understand more. That's why I continue to reread them, why I continue to read other things, including Tolkien's inspirations. So yeah, I'm not afraid of being wrong. If I'm wrong, I will change. In fact, I made a video, Tolkien reading. I think it was a Tolkien reading day video. It might have been a Hobbit day video about the origins of hobbits. And in that one, I was pretty adamant based on the language that is used in, I think it might be the prologue for Lord of the Rings, that the hobbits originated in the Third Age. But because of the way that he phrases some things, was my argument. But as I've continued reading, as I've continued seeing more things, I'm less convinced of that, in the sense that so the hobbits first appeared about 1,000 years into the Third Age, in the way that we know them to be hobbits. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they originated in the First Age, but at the same time it also doesn't, or in the Third Age, but it also doesn't mean that they didn't. If that makes sense. The form that we know and consider to be hobbits probably did originate in the Third Age, but their origins lie far back in the First Age, in the Elder Days, as Tolkien puts it. But he also indicates that they are an offshoot of men, of the human race. And because of that, I think that both can be accurate. I think that they can be probably, for example, they were a group of men that were separated and were not involved in the rest of the events of the world. They were not prominent in history, and they were kind of segregated from the rest of the history of the third or of the first and second ages. But then and through that time they developed their own language, their own culture, probably shrank in stature to some degree, and they kind of changed a little bit over those years and those ages until they appear in the third age, about 1,000 years into the third age. So I think both can be accurate, and my opinion has kind of changed a little bit. At the very least, it's become more nuanced than what I was saying. And so if there's things that I'm wrong about, absolutely I want to learn and to understand better. So I don't know.
That's interesting. I like it. Yeah, you said something earlier that I like cracked me up, because I was exactly the same way, which was I read the books first and just like fell in love, like just adore those books. I mean, I am pretty thoroughly convinced that I'm never going to read a fantasy book that beats it. It just, and it's not because like, well, because you read it before everything else. It's like, no,
Right.
like, there's something special about Tolkien. And then I was like, all right, now I'm going to watch the movies. And I was determined to be that guy who's like, you know what? The movies just as good as the books, guys. And I went through, and especially by the time I got to the end of Return of the King, I was like, no, dang it. Like, the books are just like, they are just that much better. And don't get me wrong, like Fellowship of the Ring, especially that first movie, is one of my favorite movies of all time. I think Fellowship is the strongest of the three, personally. But like, it's not the book, man. And Fellowship is the one that gets close to it. But like, especially Return of the King as a book is just, I also think that's the weakest of the movies personally. And like that book is just got most of my favorite moments in Lord of the Rings are in Return of the King.
Return is definitely I don't really have favorites, and I love all three parts equally, but I would say the most impactful is Return of the King, because it's an ending, because you see how this tale has culminated. And because of that, I think that you could say it's my favorite if you want it. If you're trying to simplify things, you could probably say it's my favorite. And I would actually say the same thing about the movies, even though I acknowledge that it's not the strongest of them. So it's a difference between enjoyment and quality, I guess. Yeah. But still, and I mean, that's even with me acknowledging that Lord of the Rings trilogy is one of, if not the greatest trilogies of films ever created.
Yeah, that's right.
But the books are still that far above anything else and above the movies. And it's just, yeah, I don't know. I've heard so many people talk, like Philip Chase, I think, is one who talked about Lord of the Rings being his favorite until he read Malazan. And I'm not sure that I will agree with that. At some point I will probably read Malazan, but it just, I would love to find something that's better than it. I would love to. That's what we're always looking for. We're always looking and hoping that the next book is going to be the best book you've ever read. Yeah. But I also know the quality of Lord of the Rings, and there's not much, even outside of the fantasy genre, that I think can compare in quality.
And I don't know. I just on Return of the King, and I can't talk about this long because I will feel this magnetic pull to my copy of the book, and I'll just want to pull it off and start reading it out loud. But it might be my favorite moment. I don't know if it's my favorite moment from the series, but it might be, is spoilers for Lord of the Rings, guys. Like, if you haven't read it already. Right. But just to say, like, this is in Return of the King, is when they go to the Black Gate and the mouth of Sauron comes out, and that confrontation, and that's one of the reasons why I'm not a fan who's in love with the extended cuts, because people are like, oh, a bunch of the scenes are added back in. I'm like, yeah, but they're done like way worse. But the Mouth of Sauron is kind of like the quintessential example of that, and it's not just like the confrontation between him and Gandalf is amazing, but there's this section where it's Pippin that's there at the Black Gate, and as the sorry, I said I can't talk about this one. It's happening. The line from the book is that, you know, because they've been presented as like, we don't even know if Frodo is close to Mount Doom, but just in case, we're gonna put ourselves out there to like distract the eye and army of Sauron, you know, so that, you know, here at the gate. And the line from the book is, Sauron took the proffered bait in jaws of steel. And like, that is one of the most like spine chilling lines. And Pippin thinks to himself, he says, as he sees the armies coming at him, he says that he thinks he understands Denethor a little bit better now, and the despair that Denethor has, and being like, man, and I kind of wish Mary was here with me, because we're both going to die. There's no getting out of this, but at least we could die next to each other. And yeah, see, it's happening. I'm like getting choked up even so just talking about it. That's like, that is, I don't know what it is about that moment, but it is so stirring and moving to me. Yeah.
I don't think it's in here. My favorite thing that I've read by C.S. Lewis is his blurb for Lord of the Rings. And it's something about, I can't remember it off the top of my head. I'd have to grab my book to find it, but it's something about how the words are, you know what? I'm gonna Google it real quick, because I would need to get it right. Here are beauties which pierce like swords or burn like cold iron.
Yeah.
And it's so accurate. It's so apt for Lord of the Rings, but it's also just like a beautiful piece of writing. And my favorite thing that Lewis has written, and Lewis is an interesting author for me, because I first read Narnia after I read Lord of the Rings, and I didn't like it because it wasn't Lord of the Rings. And it took me a long time to reframe my mindset to not be able to compare the Lord of the Rings to Narnia. And eventually I was able to do that, and my appreciation for Narnia grew. But even ever since then, the other things that I've read by Lewis, I appreciate him. He's got some really interesting things to say. I like the discussions that he has, but he's not a favorite author. He's both overrated and underrated at the same time. And so it's interesting. But no, that's just a beautiful sentence from Lewis about Tolkien's works.
That's right. Yeah. No, I'm trying to remember his name. He is the author of, he wrote a book called Chance and the Dance. I think his name's Tom Hooper. Fun fact, he's actually, if you know the missionary Elizabeth Elliot, is Elizabeth Elliot's brother, but he's like a Catholic author. Anyway, obscure thing. But Tom Hooper like wrote back and forth with C.S. Lewis a little bit, and he wrote him about Lord of the Rings. And there's an interview with Tom Hooper and I think Eric Metaxas, where he reads off the letter that Lewis wrote to him. And in it, Lewis was talking about, you know, you've read The Hobbit, but you need to go on to Lord of the Rings. I think the phrase he used was even like, that's the good stuff. It was something almost slangish like that. And his line in the letter was, except for the first chapter, which is a botch. I'm like, wow. Okay, Jack.
Yeah. No, it's I don't know. I mean, there's, dare I say, something transcendent about Lord of the Rings. It's incredible. It's really definitely something special. And for me, especially, it's changed who I am in a lot of ways. So for that, it's always gonna, even if something does dethrone it, it's always gonna hold that place of appreciation and respect. So,
well,
and influence.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I certainly wanted to talk to you about, um, here, like this evening, was how did you first get into the Collation Saga, and could you talk a little bit about what that series has meant to you?
That's a great question, and I don't remember. I
Mm.
don't know how it, I believe it was an audiobook. I believe Andrew sent me the audiobook for Deathless Beast. Because I don't believe I've read any of them physically,
Okay.
any of his books physically, but that's because he's a fantastic narrator and does his own books. I believe, how did I find out about it? It must have been on one of the Discords or something like that. And just talking to him, hearing about the book, somehow we got to talking and he sent me the audiobook. I assume, unless I bought the audiobook, but I don't think I did. I honestly, I don't remember. But I listened to it, and his combination of epic fantasy world building with through the lens of faith, through I mean, Jenned is just one of the best characters I've met in a long time. And I mean, he's not perfect. He's not a perfect person. He fails. He makes all these mistakes. But his whole, I believe it's book one, his whole search throughout that book one is for deeper faith. And it just captured me and challenged me. And I would probably even say convicted me to some degree. And just it pushed me to a point where I knew that I needed to be better. I knew that I needed to search for deeper faith, for a deeper understanding, and I don't really want to get into politics or religion in any videos that I talk about, but there's times where it can't be avoided. Tolkien
Sure.
is one of the times that it can't be avoided. Sometimes, Collation Saga is another one. I can't avoid it because of how much it affected me, how much it taught me about my own walk with the Lord, and how I view faith and study and religion and prayer to a large degree. And so it's been hugely influential on me in that respect, besides the fact that they're fantastic stories. The fact that they're incredible stories helps and makes that all the more palatable, but that's not the importance of those first two books to me. Like the first two Collation Saga books are some of the most impactful books that I have read, outside of probably Lord of the Rings and the Bible. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I found out about the first book or anything like that. I don't remember, but I'm very glad that I did, because it's changed me in a lot of ways. So,
Do you have a favorite out of the series?
it's between 1 and 2, Deathless Beast and Bone Shroud. It's between the two, and I'm not positive. I need to reread them to find out, which isn't a horrible thing. I've reread all 4 of them at this point. I've listened to them all a second time, and they're all better on reread. I get more out of them. I understand more. And the first 2 resonate with me far more deeply than the second, or than 3 and 4 do, but they're all fantastic. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. And I guess I'll plug it here, since we're talking about Meredith stuff. And you mentioned earlier he's got the Needle and Leaf trilogy, which is more of his Slavic fantasy trilogy. It's much more akin to, like, if you take like Logan or The Mandalorian, that type of storyline, with characters that feel like they walked out of the Shire, but they're in a world that's like the Witcher games. It's like that type of a fantasy story. He's got a Kickstarter that's going to be coming soon for the 3rd book in the trilogy, which just got finished. That'll be launching pretty soon. So if anyone's interested, so I'm like doing a plug, but it is fitting.
Yes.
And I got a chance to read book 3, and I can say, like, Deathless Beast was my favorite book from Meredith, and Fife and Drum, the 3rd Needle and Leaf book may have topped it. I'm not sure. It's pretty close. So yeah, people should certainly follow the Kickstarter so that you can be notified when it launches. But it's I'm not saying this because I like Andrew or because I'm trying to do some charity thing for this. You will want to read these books.
Yes.
You will want to see how this trilogy ends. Like I'm doing you a favor by letting you know about this. I say to the audience, T, you already know that. But book 3, man, is, I don't know what Andrew was smoking. It is nutty. It is one of the wildest books I've read, and like probably since Something by Wolf or Disquiet Gods by Rockio. Man, it's a wild book. Fife and Drum is so. Yeah, but I've only read Deathless Beast in terms of collation. I mean, I've got them back there, and I just finished up last week my reread of Deathless Beast because I was pretty sick when I read it the first time. So I was like, all right, we're gonna actually like refresh my memory, on what all happened there. But I know Andrew has said that it's a difficult series to pitch in some ways, for him at least, and is difficult to summarize what it's about. Or maybe I'm projecting, and it's difficult for me. So T, like, how do you pitch it, or how would you describe it to people who are interested in it?
That's a hard question, because I think the things that resonate with me are not the things that are going to resonate with most other readers. And so for me, the pitch has to do with the faith and the religion and the exploration and the respect that he has for it. But beyond that, it's epic world building. It's fairly slow paced, intentional, very intentional. Where through that pacing, you learn a lot about the world as you're exploring the world. There are times of info dumps where you just get a lot of lore at once, but they're usually in the form of a storyteller telling a story. And so that kind of makes it more palatable, more acceptable. I like them anyways. I think it's fun. I like info dumps. But beyond that, let's see. So it follows several different storylines that are all converging slowly. I don't even think they converge in book 1, but there's several different storylines that are all converging and telling the stories of the lives of these different characters. And so you have a paladin who is basically a religious warrior, a holy knight, as it were, and his journey to understanding his God and drawing closer to his God. And then you have siblings who are mercenaries, and they fight for coin, or they fight for they work as what's the word? Guards, like caravan guards type, watching people and their individual journeys as well as their journey as siblings, and how their relationship and their interactions affect each other and the world around them, and the people that they have working with them and under them. So there's those 3 different storylines, which are kind of 2 storylines, but kind of 3 storylines at the same time. And there's other like, those are the main ones that you're introduced to in book 1, and that feel important in book 1. But as you continue going, there's more that gets developed. There's more characters that get introduced and become very interesting. He does kind of like Sanderson with Stormlight, where each book is about a specific character. And so as you continue reading through the books, you kind of get more of one character than you did in the other ones. And I mean, it's hard to pitch. It's, a lot of people say it's Pillars of the Earth, but fantasy. I haven't read Pillars of the Earth, so I don't know. But if that sounds interesting to somebody, then maybe that's a helpful pitch. But
there's some similar DNA there, especially in terms of how he structures the story.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the biggest thing is knowing that it's an epic fantasy series. It, like, when you think of an epic fantasy series, this is not traditional fantasy. It's not elves and dwarves and goblins. It's humans in this massive world with other races that you come across and that you meet. But fighting like most fantasy series do, you fight monsters. There's monsters that appear and that you have to deal with. There's hordes. There's villains. There's the gods walk the earth to some degree, and you're having interactions that you're not sure if it's real or if it's imaginary. But not in a way that feels unreliable, but that's just your characters are dealing with some things that are different. We don't deal with them as humans, and actually what I would say is that we do deal with them as humans, but through the lens of fantasy you can interpret them and understand them a little bit easier. I don't know. I don't know that is really beneficial at all.
Sure. Well, no, I think it is, and it's certainly, helps put some context here to what we're talking about, especially if people haven't read it. I think you pointed out, like, the pacing is very deliberate. These are not thrillers. These are not chills and thrills type of books. And it's never that it's slow in the sense of, I feel like Meredith is wasting our time, on the page. Like, there's always something happening. There's always something that's moving the story forward. But he trusts you as a reader. Yes. He trusts you to be, like, mature and an adult, and that you don't need, throats being cut every other chapter in order to keep you, interested. You don't need somebody getting blown up or whatnot to keep you interested in the story. There's a certain amount of, like, treating me like an adult as a reader that I appreciate there.
Yeah. And I will mention, because it's important to me, they're clean. There's no language, there's no adult content, and I really appreciate that. As a reader, I really appreciate that. And I know a lot of other people don't care. But for me, that's something that is a huge draw to the series as well.
Yeah. No, and that is certainly worth pointing out, that he can pull all this off without needing, like you said, like, boobs put in your face, or the characters talking like they come from, a bar from downtown or something like that. Which is valuable. But I certainly think that fans of epic fantasy, honestly, like, I'm not a big Wheel of Time fan,
neither personally,
am I. But, like, for people who like that type of massive world that Wheel of Time has, all these factions converging, that same itch that people who like Wheel of Time, I think, like, there's something in there for collation for fans of that. I kind of hesitate making that comparison, because I know Wheel of Time can be polarizing, and I don't want to turn people off by making the comparison, but I think there's something to it there.
Yeah. The other one, and I know this was an inspiration for him, that you could say there's some similarities to, would be, and now it's gone out of my mind, The Belgariad by David Eddings, which is a classic fantasy series that was influential, but there's a lot of, I'm currently reading through that series, and I'm enjoying it a lot, but I can absolutely see the influences that it has had on Meredith and on Collation Saga. It's, again, very deliberate in its pacing. They're not long books. They're shorter than Collation Saga, I'm pretty sure, but they're very deliberate. There's a definite point to each thing that's going on, and but at the same time, it's that big world that you're exploring as you go. You're learning more as you go, but never in a sense of being overwhelmed or treated like a child that just everything is new and colorful and shiny, and you don't know, so you're just trying to take it all in at once. He allows you to accept it as it is, and to some degree through the character's eyes. It's not super, I mean, it's not first person POV, but there's a level of, you understand the world because the characters understand the world, and as they're learning pieces about it, you're also learning those things. Maybe.
No, that's worth bringing up for sure. Kind of land on the plane here a little bit. I did want to briefly mention, because this is something I've seen brought up a few times, but um, what is it about James Fenimore Cooper? I keep asking what is it questions, but explain to me your enjoyment of James Fenimore Cooper, because a lot of people know Last of the Mohicans, but they only know it by name or by the movie. But you've read like a lot that he's written.
Well, I've read his 5 books in Leatherstocking Tales, which includes Last of the Mohicans.
Yeah.
I have heard of him as an author my entire life. My parents both love him as an author. They both love Last of the Mohicans. I watched the movie as a kid or teenager and loved the movie. But then it wasn't until 2 years ago or so that I sat down and read the first book, the chronological first book, not the first book that he wrote in Leatherstocking Tales, which is The Deerslayer. And I loved it. I loved the atmosphere. I'm a huge atmospheric reader. When you can put me into the world and make me understand and see the world, I love that. So a lot of people complain about his writing because they say it's too purple or too flowery or something like that. But for one, I love that type of writing as it is. But then also, more than that, I love the stories that he's telling in that atmospheric world. And it doesn't feel flowery to me. It feels like he's describing what needs to be described. And so the Deerslayer was just beautiful, idyllic, just like you're immersed in nature, but also with this storyline set in the American frontier. This is around the French and Indian War time period. So the United States are the United States, but it's at least in some of the books. I'm not positive where everything sits. I'm forgetting details now. But you're in this early American timeline, and you're seeing the first book is basically set in New York before it's the New York that we know today, where it's cities and I mean, I know there's areas of New York that aren't just city, but it's very much wilderness, very much just nature and the seeing a different part of the world than I ever have, not having been to that area of the States yet. But it's also the relationship between the characters and the way that they think, but specifically our main character, Natty Bumppo, his mindset, the way that he thinks through things, the way that he processes things, is so interesting to me, so fascinating, but it's so respectful. A lot of people would think it's dated, but it's very respectful. It's very logical and just makes sense. And so the mixture of a fun adventure set in the American frontier, which is already something I like, mixed with the beautiful setting and atmosphere, which is something else that I like, mixed with this character that I just love reading his thought process for things. It makes for something that's very special for me. And the first 3 books are my favorite because they chronologically, the first 3 books are my favorite. The first one he wrote was The Prairie, and then he went and wrote Last of the Mohicans, and then he wrote no, that's wrong. The first one he wrote was The Pioneers, then he wrote Last of the Mohicans, then he wrote The Prairie, and then he went back and wrote Pathfinder, and then the last one he wrote was The Deerslayer, which is the first one chronologically. And so he's kind of developing his skill, but also his voice for the main character as you go. And so that first book is his latest one or that he wrote, the last one that he wrote, and it has the strongest voice for our character. And so you see that through those first 3, this very strong character voice, and then he's kind of less prominent of a character in the last 2. And that took my enjoyment down a little bit, became a little less, the story that was being told was a little less clear to understand. It's absolutely there, and as you get through it, you start seeing the pieces and how they all fit together. But it takes a little bit to those first 3 are really very clear in their direction with what they're doing, and the voice our character and everything. And that, because of that, I love those first 3 chronological books in the series. And I enjoy the last 2, but they're not as strong for me.
Sure. That makes sense. Yeah, I read Last of the Mohicans when I was in high school, but didn't pay too much attention to it. It didn't stand out to me, but your enthusiasm for him has really made me want to go back and read the first ones especially and be like, okay, like maybe there's something there that I missed, because I only read the one and just kind of moved on.
Yeah. Well, I think you'd like them probably now since you're a more experienced reader. I think that you would appreciate them more, but also you have to understand that the time that they were written during, and that's going to influence the way that they're the things that they're talking about, even to some degree the language that's being used. And that's not me saying that it's bad or that it's inappropriate or anything like that, but it does influence to some
It's
degree.
about setting expectations, right?
Right. And beyond that, beyond just knowing that this is not a modern book, go read it and read it for what it is. Just accept it and let yourself go through the story. Go with the flow, kind of. And that's, I mean, being with the setting that makes sense. You just float down the river with the book and see what happens. And I think because of that nature of those books, I think that you would appreciate them if you can go into them with that mindset. And I think most readers could, actually. I think that they're more accessible than people want to admit. Same with Lord of the Rings, to be honest. It's way easier than people want to pretend like it is. But yeah, just go into it and take it slow. Take it as slow as you need to. There's really good audiobooks for the first 3. You just have to dig for them sometimes. But the last 2 have decent audiobooks, but they're also LibriVox volunteers, and so it's kind of not the greatest all the time, but they're decent. Understandable. You can absolutely enjoy the story through them, or physically. Let's see. I think Simon Vance does the first 2, and he's
very nice,
fantastic narrator. So. Yeah. So an easy choice there. But yeah, they're just take them slow and take them as they are and see if you enjoy them. And if you don't, I also understand that. Like, if somebody doesn't enjoy them after giving them a honest try, I can't really fault them for it, because I get it. It's not going to be for everybody, but I think that they are for more people than people think.
Sure. Well, and one thing that I was curious about, because I know you're, you talk about liking them and liking sort of those pioneer type stories. Have you? I've covered it a little bit on my channel very recently, but have you heard much, or are you familiar with the Alvin Maker books by Orson Scott Card?
Only through you.
Okay.
Only through your recent videos. Yeah.
I would really be interested to hear what you think of them.
I am too. If it wasn't a series, I'd be reading the first book already.
Well, so here's what I'll tell you, is that there's a natural breaking point at the end of book 3. So if you just want to read, up to book 3, that's totally fine. And the books are short. They're all like 300 pages, 350, something like that. So they're, the first one's really short. It's like 7 hours, something like that on audio. So, yeah, I would, keep it on the back burner if now is not a good time. But I'd be really interested to see what you make of those.
So I think, if I remember correctly, I wrote my video for series that I wanted to read in 2026 before I saw your video on Alvin Maker books. And so I didn't include it on there, and I don't have them. And so because of that, I didn't. But they're ever since I've started hearing you talk about them, I'm like, I got to read these. These sound fantastic. Well, so they're definitely a priority for whenever I have time to start another series like that.
In the audiobook to the first one, Card reads this sort of like, at the very end of it, he reads this sort of like retrospective note on the series, which the last book will be out in like 2 months, which I'm like so excited for. But he's reflecting on the series at the end of this audiobook for Seventh Son, the first, and he said that part of his idea for it is he wanted to write like the epic poem "The Fairy Queen" by Spenser. He wanted to write a very American version of that same type of story.
Right.
And I haven't read The Fairy Queen, but I'm through osmosis, I'm familiar with what it is. And just what he does in that series is unlike anything that I've ever read. Like, I've read fantasy by Americans before. I've read George Martin, I've read Robert E. Howard, I've read plenty of Americans who write fantasy. And I've even read fantasy books that are set in America, even something like American Gods by Neil Gaiman. And I think what Card does in Alvin Maker is it's essentially a mythos, a mythological type of story for America, except it's told in the romantic sense, not in the epic sense. So it's all about the internalized character experience rather than the big epic experience. So it's a fairly personal story, but set in that epic type of context, And personally, I think he does a heck of a lot better job, at doing it than Neil Gaiman does. There's some interesting stuff in American Gods, but I think Card pulls it off a lot better. So, it's not Tolkien, but what Tolkien is doing, creating mythology for England that doesn't really exist, Card's not doing exactly the same thing, but it's in a similar category. So, but for America.
Yeah, it's most likely one that I will greatly enjoy if I can ever get to it. The problem is I've got so many books and so little time. But no, it's definitely a high priority for me. It's one of those ones that since I've heard you talking about it, I do like American history, especially. I love American history, and so this idea that we're twisting it and messing it up a little bit is fascinating to me. I want to see what Card does with it and how he does it both. So, and just the story, because it sounds like it tells a good story as well. So
well, I will need to land the plane soon here, but I guess I don't know, other than your YouTube channel, is there other places people should find you or find your stuff?
Well, we do have an Instagram as well, and I try to regularly have posts go up on there, or shorts or something like that. I'm not great at it. I'm not huge on the social media front, but that's really the only other place. We do have a Discord as well, linked in the description of all the videos on our channel of An Erudite Adventure. But beyond that, no, I pretty much just a YouTube channel.
Sure. Well, we will link that down below. If anyone's watching this and they haven't subscribed to An Erudite Adventure, they should do so.
Hard word. Sorry, I picked a hard word for my channel.
No, that's all right. But they should do so. I've like I told you before we started recording, I first started getting your videos in the algorithm, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. And the more I've watched the videos you put out, the more I'm like, wow, this is some great stuff, some really thoughtful discussions about some of the books you read. So I love it, and more people should go check them out. So I
appreciate it.
I guess that's the plug.
Nice words.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely. Well, thank you for letting me take up a good bit of your time here this evening.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me on. This is I think I mentioned it to you when we were talking about it. I want to do more collaborations with people, and I never get to, and I don't have good ideas for it. And so this is great for me. I'm enjoying this greatly. So thank you very much.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And to everyone else, we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye.